And later on in this programme, we'll look at how one school in Yorkshire has transformed a small area using some of the principles of communication-friendly spaces for as little as £100. But perhaps one of the most effective ways of managing transformations in learning environments is to design them in from scratch. At Homewood School in South London, they were able to use some of the new thinking in a purpose-built space. Again, the head has been inspired by the forest schools of Denmark and how they use light. This is important because research shows that children learn faster in classrooms with lots of natural light.
We're similar in some ways in that we don't always have a lot of light in this country because of our weather. And what struck me was the windows and the angles of the windows. They would make a building look almost like a ship, you know, in terms of the roof being made of glass, so that allowed a lot of light in. And I've always wanted lots of light for our children.
The head was able to brief the architect on what she wanted. That included as much natural light as possible and to use soft, diffuse overhead lighting rather than the harsh strip lighting found in so many schools.
Looking at the lighting, I mean, one of the things that can be desperate about childcare buildings is that you go in and it might be a very nice building, but then the whole place is covered in fluorescent lights. So rather than it looking like somewhere which is homely and friendly, which is really important for children, it looks like an office environment, which just is very deadening for colours, very deadening for paintings, very deadening for the children.
Again, it's not simply an aesthetic matter. Fluorescent lighting is actually banned in some European countries, and research shows that both reading and numeracy improves in areas with lots of natural light.
It's right, the sun's come out, when it's dark, you can go to sleep.
That's right, when you go to sleep.
The Communication-Friendly Spaces Toolkit also emphasises the need for some darker, more cosy spaces, which act as a focus for children to communicate with one another, rehearsing their speaking and listening skills.
Well, the contrast between light and dark is something that I think is really very exciting for children. As you go into the classroom itself, that's quite a dark space in places. And partly, actually, that's really important for children to feel sort of quiet and snug in some places. But also, I think what you can do is to create too many windows, too many doors, and then there's actually nowhere to make the home corner, nowhere to make the small spaces that children need, and to put the furniture against the walls and that sort of thing. So it's actually a combination of both of those things.
But isn't creating these positive learning environments really the job of local authorities? And doesn't it require a great deal of funding?
Early years can't manage on a shoestring. It's been underfunded for far too long, and we've really welcomed the additional funding over the last 9-10 years. But nonetheless, if we're going to really create both the sort of environment we want for young children, but also the sort of adults, the trained adults we need to have working with young children, then that has got huge financial implications, both for individual settings, but also for local authorities and for national government. And one of the things that I think will make successful or not a focus on communication and language development is if we really have the same sort of investment in that in the early years that we've seen over the last few years in literacy and mathematics in the primary sector. That's the sort of size of training investment we really do need to be seeing with the people who work with our youngest children.
Whilst progress on the big picture funding of developing communication skills in early years will take time, advocates of the new approach say that practitioners and settings can take positive steps themselves at low cost. Whitelaith School on the outskirts of Leeds did that very thing, deciding to make over a small outside space to provide the kind of cosy den which helps children to develop their own speaking and listening skills.
We wanted to make the patio more comfortable, more cosy, warmer. And so we made some drapes and had them hanging down in sort of autumn colours to create warmth. We also put up a divider so the area was smaller, so the children felt comfortable. We got natural elements, the logs to put the books on and have the children sitting on. Fabric was probably one of the most expensive things. That's probably about £35. We got carpet donated, and we made the divider, and that was probably about £30 as well.
Staff read the Communication Friendly Spaces toolkit before the makeover. Was it useful?
I think that the changes would have to be taken a little bit at a time, and maybe it's not for everyone to go the whole way down the toolkit. And so, you know, using wooden furniture would be great. It's really expensive, so we can't all do that straight away. We can try and have some quality items. Changing all the displays in the rooms isn't for every environment, but adapting the displays so that they're more focused, so they link to the needs of the children, is probably something that everybody can do. So I'd look at the toolkit and take out the elements, the key elements, and use them, but I wouldn't necessarily think that everyone has to go down the routes that some of the specialist settings have chosen.
And has the makeover been successful?
We've noticed the children are really keen to go outside and use the area. As time's gone on, with the adults modelling how to use the area, they've been using their communication skills longer and better and having great fun in there. They love snuggling under the blankets and having secret conversations and reading the books to the toys. And each week we'll be changing the props in there so they can develop their skills and, you know, remain interested and add different things. We're looking to add ICT things, torches, tape recorders, things like that, just to keep stimulating them. But at the moment, despite the weather, they've really enjoyed being out there, and there's certainly more children on the patio and more children doing communication activities.
Success on a small scale. But will the new approach find favour throughout the early years community? It's already proving controversial, with one prominent head teacher expressing trenchant criticism of the ideas. We asked the report's author, Elizabeth Jarman, and primary head, David Fan, to meet at his school. The head's a great fan of pupil displays and of the traditional approach to layout.
One of the key elements that I really hope people take from this piece of work is more of an understanding of how the physical environment that they set up for children connects with their underpinning educational philosophy. Because the way that a space is physically set up says an awful lot to children about, for instance, what kind of interactions are welcome there, what kind of behaviours are welcome there.
And I worry that people who are very reflective in their practice are suddenly going to think, well, everything I'm doing now is wrong. And I think teachers as a profession feel very much under attack at times, and yet this is another report that says you're doing it wrong. This is a guide for teachers to examine their environment, not to throw everything out like the baby with the bathwater.
Everybody who is being reflective is open to new ideas, or should be. We know, though, in this country that there are 50% of our children coming into school with speech and language difficulties, and so it's very important that we examine all aspects of how we can support those children to improve those skills.
I realise the significance of good quality interaction, and many of our children coming into our school don't have that. How do we get head teachers who are in inner city areas where SAT scores are poor, league tables are a pressure? How do we get those head teachers and those practitioners confident enough to say, well, we really think quality, like speaking and listening in the foundation unit, will bear dividends later on? And I worry, will this report actually have any significance to those settings?
This is another element. And as I said, it's been designed for those delivering the early years foundation stage. But I do think that from the practice that's already been highlighted in the report, that head teachers or heads of centres who have, for instance, Key Stage 1 students or older, can learn a lot from some of the ideas within this.
This is a school, for instance, that was built yet only 14 years ago, and it has quite serious flaws. Very few of the windows are at child height. The ventilation's poor in the school. There's low ceilings which exacerbate at times the echoing effect. We're still hitting a barrier when it comes to architecture and planning in schools, that actually they don't take enough account of what children and staff need.
We've looked, for instance, at the whole area of colour schemes that are used in schools and in classrooms. The colour test showed that children have a physical reaction quite often to particular kinds of colours, and so that needs to be considered when we're planning areas and making sure that we're choosing the right colour schemes that are going to help children to, for instance, be calm or focused, as opposed to fired up by, for example, painting a colour bright red, painting an area bright red.
You know, we've got a school here that's got red as its main colour, and that was chosen by the LEA and architects, and actually, you know, I think we need to look at the basic fabrics before we move on. And I read your report, or read your report and your views, and say, well, you may find this the wrong colour, you may find it overstimulating, but as a head teacher, this is what I want and this is what I believe in. I personally feel that it's part of the experience that children get when they're at school. The fact that they can celebrate their work, the fact that there's words on the wall. I think it's a very important part of their education.
We're certainly not saying tear down
No.
all of your displays.
Good.
What we're wanting to see is more of a neutral environment, background-wise, so that the children's work can go centre stage. So, for example, if you've got a group of children in a story area listening to a story that the teacher's reading, looking at a big book, for instance, you wouldn't particularly want a very, very busy display in the background there, for obvious reasons, that the children will be very distracted.
One of the best teachers I've ever seen was a teacher who read the book Stig of the Dunk by Clive King, and she made her room a den, Stig's den, Stig's cave, and the children were completely immersed in the environment. It was an experience, and it allowed them to step out of their own environment and move into Stig's environment, and for them, they got a massive amount out of that book.
I have to say that this report is certainly not encouraging people to have dull classrooms.
Right.
If we're wanting an environment that the children interact with, if we want an environment that is celebrating the children's work, I personally like to see the children involved in that. It's a way of recording their learning, and also an opportunity for us to annotate their work and record what they've said, and they can then refer back to that, and it can then reinforce speaking and listening skills and the activities that they're engaged in that area, for instance.
The debate will continue, because a reappraisal of traditional layout is bound to cause a great deal of reflection, challenging, as it does, practice that's held dear in many settings. You can join the debate by logging on to the Teachers TV website to see what other people working in your sector have to say about the ideas raised by communication-friendly spaces.